Hey guys! Welcome back to a brand new video. Today, I'm going to be showing you guys how you can make your very own elevator. Or better said, how you can make sequencers move you. Okay, so to show how we're going to do this, I just threw down one of these robot factory prefabs, because, well, this here seems like a perfect spot to make an elevator, to make it ride all the way up to top. Now, how exactly are we going to do that? Well, we're going to need a couple of things. The first thing that we'll need is a sequencer. Now, the sequencer is going to have two functionalities. First of all, the visual part, and second of all, the moving. Secondly, we'll need a trigger, but I'll get to that in just a moment. And then lastly, what we need is the brand new device that we got, the brand new barrier device. Now, what makes it so different than the normal barrier is that this one can be placed freely around. And this just opens up a ton of new possibilities and is very useful. It doesn't just allow you to place it anywhere, it can also be set to a width, height, or depth of 0.05. So that means we can now make it as thin as a wall, or even just make it look like a tiny little block. And the coolest thing is that you can even grab it and resize the device to make it even smaller or even bigger. So this is so useful. But what we're going to do with this is that since we can move it around freely, is that we're just going to create a elevator simulator pretty much, where we constantly push up the player with new barriers. But before we go on, one more really cool trick is that you can set it to be enabled on all, and then it also has collision inside of create. So it makes it a lot easier when you're testing death runs, so that you know exactly if the barrier is placed correctly. And now what we're going to do is we're going to set a channel on it saying enable on 1, disable on 2, copy the barrier, and then up the channels by 1. So the next one is 2 and 3. And then just put it to grid snap 8. You can do it grid snap 16 as well to make it a little bit more fluent. And then just keep dragging it up. Copy it, paste it again, up the channels, copy it, paste it, up the channels, copy it, paste it, up the channels, copy it, paste it, up the channels, and so on and so on. And this is the process that we're going to repeat. So the sequencer isn't actually going to push us. What is going to happen is we're going to enable these barriers, these very thin layers that we can place exactly on the same height and the moving sequencer, and then it's just going to seem like it's pushing us up. Now this is just one example. This is just the example that I invented to show you guys the power of this new barrier device. Because a lot of cool things can happen with this. You can place them freely, you can rotate them, and you can do so much cool stuff with it. Next up, we'll need our sequencer. First, we'll need to calculate how high exactly we need to get. Once we have that sorted out and we know that the height is about the same to where we eventually want to end up, and then all that is left to do is change the configuration, scroll a little bit down, and change the pulse direction to up, so that it doesn't just move from left to right, but, well, goes up. And then lastly, we're going to lower the speed a little bit, the tempo. Play around with this, it might be too fast, it might be too low. Since we're using barriers that aren't exactly stacked, we might need to lower it a little bit, but we'll figure that out as we go. Now that we got that set, grab a trigger and place it on the same height as your first barrier. Disable the sound and VFX, just in case because it makes a lot of noise, and then bind it to channel 1 and drag it somewhere that is still in your zone, in your sequencer, but isn't really visible anymore. Now that we've got that on about the same height, we're just going to copy it and just like our barrier, up it a little bit and change the channel. Copy it, paste it, and up the channel. And then we're going to repeat this process until we have the same amount of triggers as we have barriers, or until we get to the part that we really want. Now at this point I was about ready to test, and then I figured out I made a tiny mistake and I didn't want to repeat my entire tutorial. So what did I forget? I forgot to disable the barriers at game start, because obviously if all of these barriers are already enabled, they're not gonna enable and they're just gonna stay up. So luckily I didn't make it all the way to the top yet, and the only thing that I need to change on these barriers is change the enable during phase to none. Okay, back to testing it out. Okay, so now that those are all fixed, all that I have to do is just grab a button that I set right here, and we're going to set it on a channel that we don't use yet to activate the sequence. So just to be sure, I'm going to place it on 150, which is the last currently available channel, and set this sequencer to start on 150 as well. Then place it just a little bit more here so that it flows a little bit more together, so that it starts right there and I don't have to run to the sequencer, and start the game. So, game is starting, we can't see anything, all the barriers are invisible. Now when I run here and I start my button, the sequencer comes in. What it does is it triggers those triggers that are behind the scenes and enables the barriers little by little. Now time to just repeat this process. Now that we have about 10 to 15 of those barriers, there's two things that we can do to continue this. One, we either just keep repeating what we did before, place a new barrier, up the channels, and the trigger with the same channel. Or we can reuse our channels and barriers that we already have, which is a lot easier. So that's what I'm going to do here. So just grab all the triggers that we already have and all the barriers that we already have, and then just drag them up to the point where we were already. Now what happens if I would enable the vision on all of these barriers is that they would loop at the same time. But since they're above you, you won't even notice it. And that's one way that we can easily save some channels and still make it completely work. And that's it, guys. I hope you guys liked this little introduction to the brand new barriers and making our own elevator. And go and play around with it because the options are endless. We can make them very small, very big, have it just be a tiny pole, rotate them around, make them very thick, spin them around, do whatever you want with them, and I can't wait to see what people make with this. The live events are going to be so crazy that people are going to start making in creative. Guys, the future is bright. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys very soon. Peace!